Comrade Kamala Harris now makes the fatal mistake of her campaign. Good morning, Kuhner country. Okay, my friends, the start of the Democratic National Convention is today. Already they're anticipating Antifa, Black Lives Matter. There's going to be a lot of pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters. In fact, tens and tens of thousands, according to the media, are now reportedly getting ready to descend upon Chicago. And we'll see. Many are fearing serious political violence, potential rioting, looting. But whatever happens, in some ways, it's a sideshow. And the reason why it's a sideshow is because Kamala Harris has now made not just the greatest mistake of her campaign, it is a fatal mistake. She unveiled her economic plan in Raleigh, North Carolina on Friday. And what everybody had been reporting beforehand turned out to be correct. She now is openly calling for Soviet-style price controls on food. You can't make this up. Listen to Comrade Kamala in her own words. Roll cut 1, Mike.
I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules.
Now, to show you how incompetent she is, and this is why they don't like her giving speeches, no matter how scripted they are. Did you catch the fatal, a silly mistake? It's supposed to be price gouging, but she can't even get that right to show you what an illiterate this woman is on so many levels. She go, it's price gouging. Let's play it again, Mike. Listen to this. Instead of price gouging, it's price, play it again, Mike.
I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food.
And the lemons are clapping.
My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules.
Incredible. I mean, it's just, she even blows the central line of her entire economic program. Okay? I mean, this is what I mean. Look, stop hitting the bottle. Okay? She's got, rumors are now flying, and the Trump campaign is finally now discussing these reports that are surfacing that she has an issue with drinking, that she's a lush, as I put it on X last night. And this is going to be more obvious as the campaign goes on, because the media cannot cover it up, and her campaign can't cover it up. And that's why she often slurs her words. That's why she often doesn't make sense. That's why she delivers frequent word salads. That, and obviously the very heavy marijuana use. Okay, she's a pothead, and has been well documented for a very, very, very long time. And that's why this woman can't make sense. But let's leave that, let that go, as I would like to say. Okay? As I like to say. Even the New York Times, even the Washington Post, even This Is CNN, have trashed her price control plan. In fact, according to them, they can't believe she went ahead with this destructive, reckless, juvenile idea. Because let me tell you what has happened every time, anywhere, any place, and I don't just mean for the last 100 years, literally for the last 2,000 years. Every time price controls on food in particular, but price controls in general, but on food in particular, has been tried, it led to an absolute disaster. The Roman Empire, the Romans tried it. And what do you think happened? The Romans, which had a much simpler economy than we have today, the Romans tried it. It led to massive starvation and food shortages. But let's not go back 2,000 years, okay? Everywhere it's been tried, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, Cuba, China, it doesn't matter. Wherever you've had price controls imposed on food and food production, it always, inevitably leads to chronic, serious food shortages, in some cases, outright famine and starvation. And in the end, long lines and no food. No food. It is one of the most disastrous policies ever in human history. And yet, this is the central plank of her entire economic plan, to bring down prices at the grocery store. Now, as I talked about on Friday, and this is a molto importante point, okay? The mother of all points, as Saddam Hussein would put it. Grocery stores and generally big food producers have about a 2%, 1, 2, in some cases 3%, but mostly 1 to 2% profit margin. The profit margins are extremely low. If you start freezing prices across the board, what do you think is going to happen? Because labor continues to go up, utilities, energy bills, overhead, everything else, it's still going up. So what's going to happen is, inevitably, they go out of business. Producers say, well, why should I make pork? Or why should I make beef? Or why should I make chicken? There's no money in it. They're freezing all the prices. I'm losing money. No one's going to work for a profit, for a loss. People want to work for a profit, to live, to put some money in their pocket. And so what happens is, grocery stores are going to start to shut down. You're going to have food production begin to get disrupted, and you're going to start to see our supply lines be utterly destroyed when it comes to food. Don't take my word for it. That's literally happening in Venezuela. Go and look at the pictures of grocery stores in Venezuela. They're empty. They're empty. Or like in the old Soviet Union, there's like 30 cans of ham, and there's 300 people lined up outside the store. Then you got to call in the police, and seriously, the police in the parking lots to prevent riots from breaking out. Then people begin to attack the trucks, the convoys carrying the food, so they have to have armed guards. It becomes an absolute breakdown in society. That's why the Washington Post, her media allies, and the New York Times, and, by the way, former Obama economists have come out and said, this is one of the craziest ideas I've ever heard in my life. Now, the last time we tried price and wage controls in this country, it was under Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick, as he was known in those days. Listen now to Tricky Dick announce price and wage controls over 50 years ago. Roll cut 1A, Mike.
The time has come for decisive action, action that will break the vicious circle of spiraling prices and costs. I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days.
Okay, what do you think happened after 3 months? It was a disaster. He had to end it after 3 months. And what do you think happened? Prices went up even more. Inflation went up even more. Even more. And then eventually you had the energy crisis of the 1970s. And they imposed, what do you think? Oil and gas price controls. And what do you think happened? Let long lines. Shortages in oil and natural gas. People took forever to get to wait for hours just to tank up your car. And even then, they told you can only put $5 or $10 in your tank. Do you remember those days under Jimmy Carter? This is exactly what we're going to get here in the United States. But what's never been tried before is this ban on so-called price gauging, okay? Price gouging. That's never been done before. Wage and price controls, yes, they've been a disaster. But how do you define price gouging? How do you define it? She doesn't even define it herself. So what are you going to do now? You're going to set up a secret IRS police? And they're going to go to grocery store after grocery store after grocery store? And look at a can of beans? And say, I don't know here, $2.98, I think it needs to be $2.58. Kraft mac and cheese, you know what, $1.49, no, that's price gouging. I think it needs to be $1.19. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen. And what you're going to see is grocery stores are going to close. And you're not going to be able to get food. And it's going to start in the low-income areas and in the rural areas, and then it's going to spread to the high-density suburbs. My friends, there's a word for this plan. It's called communism. She just lost the election. 619 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, trust me when I tell you this. This is a huge, fatal mistake on the part of Kamala Harris and her campaign. She is not going to recover from this, and Trump is already seizing the massive opportunity given to him, and he just now needs to keep driving this point over and over and over again. The centerpiece of her economic plan is now Soviet style, literally from the Soviet Union. They were the ones who really went all in on this price control policy on food, in particular food and food production. And this is communism. And every other country that has tried it, whether it's the former USSR, China, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Cambodia, name your country, it has led to mass starvation and chronic food shortages. This woman is crazy. She's an absolute lunatic. You can tell she's a red diaper baby. Because her father, who, as you know, was a Marxist professor of economics, was also an advisor to the government of Jamaica, in the 1970s. And they had raging inflation, and what did he recommend? Same thing. Massive price controls. And it was a disaster. It was a dismal failure. In fact, it eventually led to prices going much higher, but before then, what do you think happened? Long lines, food shortages, and the beginnings of a famine, of real hunger in Jamaica. So the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Her mother was a communist. Her father was a communist. This is not name calling. This is literally what they were. They were Marxist-Leninists. And they believed in la revolution. Now, let me just say this, and then I want to open it up to the phone lines, because there's a lot more to discuss. 617-266-6868 is the number. The fact that this woman would publicly and openly adopt price controls on food, combined with, this is the part that's a complete mind bender, a federal ban on price gouging. Never before has that been done in American history. In fact, it looks, outside of Marxist economies, okay, literally, like out of the Eastern Bloc, communist countries, no Western country has ever tried a ban on, quote unquote, a national federal ban on so-called price gouging, or as she likes to call it, price gauging. Now, how do you define what's an excessive profit? what is too high a price? What actually is gouging? What is it? What is it? Yeah. So to find that out, they're going to go grocery store to grocery store, or farm to farm, or meat processing plant to meat processing plant. Or they're going to go to, Kraft or Tyson's or these big food producers. And they're going to go into these plants and they're going to start to check. The government literally is going to start to check, and they're going to arbitrarily decide what's acceptable and what's not an acceptable price. Now, what do you think is going to happen? This is the same government that can barely deliver the mail. This is the same government that, spent $25 billion to build EV stations, and I think in total they've built 8. But they're going to control our entire country's food supply and food production and food delivery, our entire food supply chain. My wife, God bless her, made a brilliant point over the weekend. And she really reemphasized it to me during dinner last night. She said, Jeff, think about it. Really. How hard is it to, just sit back objectively, okay? How hard is it to just control one person? Say you want to do, you want your wife to do something, or you want your husband to do something, whatever it is. Or your children, your kids, oh, hey, Ashton, can you clean up your room for the 500th time? Could you stop teasing your sister relentlessly for the 500th time? I could just, whatever. Ava, could you stop leaving a mess every time you have breakfast? Can't you put everything back, throw things out, put everything back? And then what you can't put back, throw it out and put it in the garbage can. Clean up after yourself, for God's sake. Okay. Do you know how many times I've had this conversation with my 2 children? Now, the point being, because you're going to say, Jeff, what does this have to do with economics? If you can't control one person, you're going to control an entire economy? You're going to control 330 million people? You're going to control one of the most complex food supply chains in the entire history of the world. Once you start messing with supply chains, didn't the pandemic teach us anything? Anything? Once you start messing with supply chains, especially when it comes to food, that's the one thing you don't play with. Because that's hunger. That's, you go to the grocery store. Now, honestly, what do you think is going to happen? We go to the grocery store and there's nothing there. Or like in Venezuela, there's a rotten apple here and one cart of, one jug of milk here and 2 loaves of bread there, and people are running and fighting for whatever is left over. This is what Waltz and Harris want to bring to the United States. This is literally now the centerpiece of their economic plan. 632 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to go right to the phone lines. Phone lines are jammed. But many of you on the text line, you can text us 70470, 70470. You've also been messaging the Kuhner Man on Messenger, and of course emailing me, and all of you are making the exact same points, which is a brilliant one. And saying, please mention this, Jeff. Please mention this, Jeff. And you're right. You're completely right. Every country that has tried this kind of ban on so-called price gauging, as she puts it, that moron. And by the way, people ask me how much pot, how much weed has Kamala Harris smoked in her life? More than Cheech and Chong combined. That's how much. So maybe that explains this, this so-called economic plan, this Marxist program for the United States. But anyway, let that go. When you impose these kind of draconian price controls on food, inevitably, not only do grocery stores go out of business, they go bankrupt. Food producers go out of business, they go bankrupt. Then the government steps in and they buy the grocery stores and they buy the food production facilities. They eventually end up buying the farmland from the farmers. So the government then takes over the entire food supply chain. And that's when they impose rationing. They give out ration cards, and that's when they really control you. That's when they have you really by the, by the throat. They've got their boot on your neck. And then they control the entire population. And there's no accident here. They're telegraphing. This is a hammer and sickle revolution. This is a communist revolution. Come November, if they can steal this election, because now the only way they can win it is to steal it. There is no way in hell that you propose something as insane as this and as destructive as this, and you're thinking you're going to win the election fair and square. It's impossible. Look, and again, I don't want to repeat myself. I could play the clips. We've got them. I'd rather listen to you and go to the phone call, so I'm not going to play them. But when you have CNN's economists, when you have the New York Times economists, when you have economic editorial writers for the Washington Post, the biggest water carriers for Kamala, their words, not mine, this is an extraordinarily bad idea. Every time this is tried, it has been a dismal failure. Their words, not mine. They're begging her, walk this thing back. Just walk it back. Run away from it. Dump it. Get rid of it. No. Waltz loves it. Kamala loves it. Why would Waltz love this? Her VP pick, the Marxist from Minnesota. Because as we're now finding out, he has traveled to China over 30 times. Both he and his wife, they honeymooned in China. He was a teacher in China. Do you know what? To teach in China under that brutal communist regime, the only way you get a permit is if you're a fellow traveler. That's the only way. You think they allow some non-communist to teach in anywhere in communist China? And in fact, someone who worked with him said, no, he's a Maoist. He's an admirer of Mao. Waltz is admirer of Mao. Who do you think imposed price controls on China and led to massive starvation of the population? Mao. So no wonder he's fully on board. And if no one else has the guts to say it, I'm going to say it. Let me tell you the ultimate reason why. Yes, it's about power. Yes, it's about control. Yes, it's about a communist takeover of the United States. There's no question now. Okay, there's no question. This is an openly Marxist policy, which, by the way, to repeat again, was implemented by her Marxist professor father when he was advising the Jamaican government in the 1970s. And what do you think happened in Jamaica? Ask the Jamaicans. They went hungry. They went hungry until they said, end this fiasco before we all starve to death. Jean-François, John Kerry, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, Bill Gates, Barack Hussein Obama, you can look it up, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, the entire globalist cabal, Jeff Bezos, have all come out and said that there are at least 3 to 4, if not 5 billion too many people in the world. That the world, according to them, is overpopulated. And what you need is, you need depopulation. And how do you get depopulation? Famine and mass starvation and war. But especially famine and mass starvation. If you want famine and mass starvation, I'm telling you, this is the way to do it. Don't just impose draconian price controls on food and grocery stores and food production, but then throw on top this vague, nebulous, nefarious, frankly sick idea. We're going to go after price gouging. What is price gouging? We don't know. We'll see it when we find it. This is a war on capitalism. This is a war on business. This is a war on free enterprise. This is a war on property ownership. This is deliberate. This is a war on America's food supply itself. Donald Trump hammers this point home again and again and again, because now she can't run from her own program. She can't run now from commonomics, because that's what this is, Kamalanomics, leading to communism, Kamala communism. That's what this is all leading to. He exposes her. This election is over. Agree, disagree. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, lines are jammed. Russ in Boston, you're going to kick us off, Russ. Thanks for holding and welcome.
Jeff, good morning.
Hi.
There's sunshine today in America. We'll put it that way. First of all, I want to thank you for doing the pain and suffering for me by watching this Karl Marx convention, because I'm afraid of my blood pressure going up if I watch this insanity, okay? Now, Jeff, I remember the Nixon price control flop. I remember the Carter gas lines and the rationing. As a former world traveler, I remember before Carter, we could travel the globe and know the government had our back. If anything happened, they would get us out of the country, whatever problem was in the world. It's no longer that way. From Carter to this idiot in here with Afghanistan and that other witch, his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, Jeff, it's the economy, stupid. Without question, okay? It's the economy, stupid. The biggest problem is the cost of energy. Biden and Harris are the useful idiots, and they're in bed with the environment profiteers, the environment Nazis, and the environment panic peddlers. The real global warming will come from an atomic war. Understand that. And I'll tell you something. Today, the American people are their head in the sand, okay? Because most of them don't even want to know what to do if we're under attack. Now, because as a kid, I remember duck and cover. If you're not close to ground zero, duck and cover still makes sense. They're not teaching any of us. Most of these idiots are not going to know what to do at all if we're under attack. It is unbelievable, Jeff, how stupid we've become because of these SOB politicians in Washington, the stupid idiots that follow the Democrats, the Republicans, all of them. It's so stupid following these idiots. You've got to worry about your own survival. You cannot depend on government. The government is not your friend, without question. All right? Now,
Russ, can you just hang on, because we got a break? But honestly, what I would add to everything what you're just saying now, Russ, you got to start growing your own garden. No, really, I'm telling you, if Kamala wins, you better start growing your own food, because you're going to have a hard time finding it at the grocery store.
I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules.
Honestly, I don't even think she knows what she's reading. I mean, that's what Sandy and I were talking about before the show. I think she's such an economic illiterate. Comrade Kamala. I think she has no clue. She just, you could tell she didn't even read the script once or twice before she went out on stage in North Carolina. And remember, this was her big rollout. We waited 25 days for this. 25 days. Apparently, she was in the basement. She was hiding in the bunker to put forth a policy that, let's put it charitably, that was tried 50 years ago under Nixon and failed dismally. So at its most charitable. I mean, the wheels of this campaign have already come off. I'm telling you, now that we know what to expect in her first, she says she's going to do this in her first 100 days. If she wins in November, start learning to grow food in your garden. That's the only advice I can give you. 6:51 here on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to go right back to the phone lines. But first, this is from Kevin in an email, and he hits the nail right on the head. Jeff, the price of food and every other commodity is directly tied to the cost of energy. In this case, the price of fuel. Under these two jackasses, parentheses Biden/Harris, fuel costs have skyrocketed, thereby raising the cost to produce and ship all goods, raising the cost of everything you buy, including food. This is classic problem, reaction, solution. They created the problem, they're staging the reaction, and now they're coming in with the solution. It all begins and ends with them. Bingo. Who created the inflation? Biden and Harris. This is all at their feet. Who spent nearly $6 trillion, $5.8 trillion to be more exact. All of it, by the way, deficits. When you spend that much money, you inevitably create massive inflation. When you borrow that much money, then you have to print that much money. That inevitably leads to inflation. Remember this fundamental economic truth. Never forget this. Government creates inflation. Let me repeat that. Only government can create inflation. No one else can create inflation. And so they created the inflation. Spend, spend, spend. And then borrow, borrow, borrow. And of course, print, print, print. And now, after having created the crisis, like typical leftist politicians, they then offered themselves up with the solution. Yet the solution is even worse, the solution is even worse than the cure. So this is now, or the cure is even worse than the solution is worse than the problem. The cure is worse than the disease. That's what we're seeing now. These price controls are worse. Paying a ton at the grocery store, believe me, it hurts. Inflation hurts. Price controls. The cure is even worse than the disease. Price controls, you will starve. You will go hungry under price controls. So they create the problem, then they offer government as more solution, which makes the problem even worse. But notice, the whole time, their power and their control grows and grows and grows. And what scares me is that you have so many Bills in Sudbury. I'm being serious now. And Ben's in North Andover, and Chris is in Gloucester. Economic illiterates. Okay, as the Russians would say, idiots. Idiots. They're like, it makes sense to me. Just freeze all the prices. Go after them for price gouging. You scapegoat those businesses. You scapegoat those grocery stores. You go and get them. She's playing to the rabble. She's playing to the low information voter. And Trump now needs to hammer her and hammer her and hammer her. Because God forbid, now we know for certain, she wins in November, this country is finished. Finished. And you're going to see something that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Real hunger and real starvation and real breadlines. 617-266-6868 is the number. By the way, all you need to know, the plan that she unveiled, $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion. That's what it's going to cost us. This is on top of an administration that has given us $2 trillion budget deficits year after year after year. The budget deficit projected for this year, $1.9 trillion. Let's not quibble. $2 trillion. What does she propose? An extra $1.7 trillion in spending on top of the $2 trillion in deficits. Every economist has now come out. The Brookings Institution, liberal institution, Tax Policy Center, nonpartisan. I could go on and on. All of them has said the price controls will lead to food shortages, and this massive spending blowout will bring record inflation. Record inflation. Now, either they're colossally stupid, like a child with a gun, and they're just waving this thing around, and eventually someone's going to get shot, or this is deliberate. This is Cloward Piven. Overwhelm the system to destroy the system to then control the system. 617-266-6868 is the number. I don't care how you slice it. This is now the most far left wing, dangerous Marxist presidential ticket in the history of the United States. In the history of the United States. There's no way they win this at the ballot box. There's no way. And I'm telling you, it's obvious they're going to try to steal it. They're going to try to steal it. Because this is not a winning message. This is a recipe for decline and disaster. Rob in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Rob, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Rob.
Jeff. Back in New England. Let me tell you how they're going to sell this, and they're going to sell this slick and easy, Jeff. There's already 50% of us who are falling for their crap. They're going to do what I used to do when I taught undergrads. First day I would turn them into little socialists and do something similar to holding up a grocery store item and saying, this is $8 and it only costs the producer $1.25 to produce it. Is that fair? No, that's not fair. Kamala is going to do things like that. This stuff sells itself. It sells easy because they won't mention the factors of production, such as the fuel costs are a factor of production that's variable. You know, it's going up, so the food is going up. But they won't even mention the workers in the field, the 5 18-wheeler truck rides that can of green beans has to go through to get from Yuma, Arizona to here. They will play on the emotion, and they did this in China and Cuba and Venezuela to a T, where they emphasize the gouging is profit making, and they will look at the difference between the 75 cents to grow the green beans versus the $2.50 to sell it as profit. People, the commies and socialists distort the word profit all the time, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they exploit it because they know the slack-jawed Joe Six-Packs fall for it. And when you're in the supermarket, you're looking at, $8 or a $10 pork roast, saying this can't be. This was $2 just a couple of years ago. They don't ask themselves, how did it get that way? And they don't think about the factors of production, all the various factors of production. The fact that we've got to pay every factory worker more because of the fuel prices to get him to work, let alone the 18-wheeler. They won't cover that, and the press is going to have her back. They are going to support her and reinforce her lies.
I got to say, though, Rob, I agree with everything. And by the way, you're dead on. Brilliant. Absolutely dead on. You look at labor costs, what you have to pay for workers, overhead, energy, electricity, utility, transportation, everything that it takes, whatever, the aluminum, the canning process to put the green beans inside the can, like everything from beginning to end. The left has no concept of how complicated and complex that entire chain of production is, and how intricate it is, and how at every stage there are costs. And they don't get it, that the profit margin is very small. Now, and the other thing is, don't even take my word for it, Rob, okay? Please, don't. I want you to look it up. Venezuela, by the late 1990s, was one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest country in all of Latin America, all of South America, all of Central America. They got a ton of oil. They had a big and growing middle class. The Venezuelans were on the move. And then this guy called Hugo Chavez came along, this socialist, a Marxist firebrand, a demagogue, like Kamala Harris, like Joe Biden, like Barack Hussein Obama. And exactly what you're saying. He said, why are you paying this at the grocery store? Why are you paying exactly $10 for a pork roast? You should only be paying $6. And I'm going to squeeze them. And I'm going to squeeze these bloodsuckers, as he called them, these price gougers. That was the term that he used. These are price gougers. And he implemented massive price controls on food. Within a couple of years, grocery stores shut down. Food producing facilities shut down. Long lines. Massive famine and starvation to the point that millions are fleeing Venezuela. They're still fleeing Venezuela. And the government now, all grocery stores in Venezuela, government owned. All food processing, government owned. Most of the farmland, government owned. And the people are just getting hungrier and hungrier and poorer and poorer. The only thing I would disagree with you on, Rob, is that on this one particular policy, at least for now, I'm just going by the last couple days. I mean, you had an official unsigned editorial by the Washington Post saying this is one of the dumbest, stupidest ideas they've ever heard. That they cannot believe that she came out with this idea. Take it back. The New York Times, I almost spit my food out yesterday. You're reading the New York Times, and they're like, this is a horrible, they're citing Obama economists saying this is going to lead to much higher food prices in the end. It's going to lead to a surge in inflation because these things collapse, and it's going to lead to massive food shortages. So the media so far, here, I'll play you CNN. Rob, don't take my word for it. Here is CNN never criticizes Kamala Harris. They've bent over backwards for Kamala Harris, but not on this, because they know this spells disaster, literally disaster. Roll cut 17. This is Catherine Rampel going after Kamala Harris on her price controls. Roll cut 17, Mike.
It's not going to be markets. It's not going to be supply and demand that's determining how much your grocery store charges you for milk or for eggs. It's going to be some bureaucrat in D.C., which seems like totally unworkable, first of all, for the FTC to be deciding like how much Kroger charges for eggs in Michigan. But it also would be very bad for markets. We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before: Venezuela, Argentina, the Soviet Union, etc. It leads to shortages. It leads to black markets, plenty of uncertainty. And beyond that, the specific way this bill is written might actually increase prices. So anyway, the devil's in the details, I guess, for that bill, but it's really hard for me to imagine any form of legislation that preserves the spirit of what she's proposing that would not be, at best do nothing, at worst cause a lot of harm.
Rob, final word to you, my friend.
Well, we'll have to wait and see and watch how the mainstream media supports her or criticizes this idea. But Joe Sixpack and Mary Kitchen Cooker are looking at the prices in that meat section on the bean shelf, and they don't read the news. They don't read the New York Times or the Washington Post. That's it, Jeff. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Well, look, we haven't done this in a while, in a long, long time. But I'm going to, suggest it to Sandy, and we'll see when we get to break. But I'm thinking of opening up the lib line, reopening the lib line, and asking them, do they support Kamala Harris's price controls? And let's see with the Bills in Sudbury and the Chris's in Gloucester and the Bens in North Andover and all the other Moonbats, and there's many of them who listen to this show, if they support it. And I will bet you the best steak at the post-1917 steakhouse, and they have phenomenal steaks, believe me. I will bet you the best steak at the post-1917 steakhouse, that every single one of them, right down the party line, baby. Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah, we love it. We love it. They're gouging. They're bloodsuckers. They're taking too much profit. They're exploiting us. Get them. Go get them. I guarantee you that they support this insane policy. I guarantee it. By the way, go to a steakhouse now while you still can. 617-266-6868. Victor in Georgetown. Thanks for holding, Victor, and welcome.
Tuna Man, happy Monday morning, brother. These people are supposed to be the brightest people that we elect to go to D.C., and they're talking about the profits that the grocery stores make. Jeff, I guess they didn't get the news flash that we have 10 million people that invaded our country in the last 3 or 4 years. Do you think those people eat groceries? Do you think they go to the store and make purchases? And the grocery stores are doing more business now than ever before. The population is the largest it's ever been in the United States. Of course, the grocery stores are going to make money, but like everything else, the politicians have to take take advantage of anything that can keep them in power. And speaking of that, Kuhner Fitzpatrick was the mayor of Detroit. That was before he went to prison for 18 years, federal prison, because he was stealing out of $70 million worth of federal contracts. And identity politics get us there, Jeff. They have elected him, say, oh, we've got a black man. He cares about the people in Detroit. They don't care. Anything, it's like if you ever go to the if you go to the carnival and you play one of them silly games, it's already stacked against you. And any time that we expect politicians to take from someone else, the guy behind the tree, and give it to us, we're playing the carnies game. They love that. And they never win. If you look at the war on drugs, how did we do on that? The war on poverty, the war on illiteracy. These people never win anything, Jeff. And the last thing I want to say is the solution is with people like you, me, and your listeners. We need to ask 2 of our friends to request their absentee ballot, vote early, ask them to do the same thing. We are the conservative movement. No one is coming to save us, Jeff. No one is going to save us from these moronic people that just sit there and vote for these clowns, irrespective of the damage that is done. When I was a little kid, I'll end with this. When I was a little kid in school, I remember and I was so proud, the United States of America sent millions of bushels of wheat just to Russia because the people were starving.
Oh, excellent. That's very true. Yeah, you're right. Communism under Russia was so bad, and these price controls that they implemented, that Russia, which had Ukraine at the time, the Soviet Union, the breadbasket of Europe, they couldn't feed their own people. We fed them. 719 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to ask all of you, Kamala Harris now unveils a $1.7 trillion with a T spending plan. It's a spending binge. It's a blowout plan. At the heart of it, Soviet-style price controls. If this plan is implemented, and she says she will do it, in the first 100 days of her presidency, economists, left, right, center, they don't agree on much, but on this they agree. You are going to see serious chronic food shortages, and you are going to see the possibility of starvation and famine in the United States. So my question to you, do you support these price controls? I'm looking for liberals to call in. I'd like to hear from liberals calling in and see if you support this or not. Many Kamala supporters say they're all for it. After the rally in North Carolina on Friday, when she officially released her plan and spoke about it, many of the supporters in the crowd said they love it. Artificially freeze these prices, they believe, is going to give them immediate relief. So there clearly is a growing appetite for communism in the United States. My question to you, do you like her policies? Do you dislike her policies? And is price controls the way to lower, is it the way to lower prices that you pay at the grocery store? 617-266-6868 is the number. Heather in Maine. Thanks for holding, Heather, and welcome.
Jeff, how are you?
Good. How are you, Heather?
I'm doing good, thank you. You're a historian. I'm sure you've heard of the Red Famine.
Oh, yes. What happened in Ukraine? Yes. Well, they imposed price. One of the aspects of that famine was price controls.
Right. Yep. And I believe that that's what she's laying out right now. And Americans are so uninformed that they'll fall for this stuff. You know, the government came in, took over all the farms, said we're going to feed everybody. And then there was not enough food. And then they would visit the farmers and take their animals. And it led to cannibalism and starvation. Anybody that believes her is got their head in the sand.
Well, Heather, I've got to ask you. I mean, look, I think the polls are bogus. I don't believe the polls. I think they're push polls. I don't believe that she's as popular as they say she is. Why? Because I covered Obama in 2008 when I was at the Washington Times. And I saw the arenas. They were packed. Obama legit had 40, 50, 60,000 people in stadiums and in arenas. This woman can barely get 250 people to show up. So the media's talk about this Kamal mania, and she's even more popular than Obama, and they've never seen a phenomenon like this. I know they're lying. I mean, I know it. But there clearly is some support for this. You know, there's the Bills in Sudbury. There's the Bens in North Andover. There's the Chris's in Gloucester. The people at that rally in North Carolina. You know, by the way, a lot of younger women in their 20s and early 30s were interviewed, and they said, I love it. I go to the grocery store. I pay too much. I want the government to step in and freeze all of these prices. So, you know, it's, as one person put it, Heather, it's like going back to middle school And the kid that stands in front of the middle class, the middle school classroom and, running for president and promises free vending machines for everybody. That's the one that always wins. And that's what she's trying to portray herself now. She's Santa Claus. She'll give you, she'll artificially keep prices in place. She'll give you money if you have a child. She'll give you $25,000 to help you with a down payment on your first home. It's just government goodies, government handouts, spend, 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 borrow, borrow, borrow. And people like it. People don't think about tomorrow. They just want something in their pocket today. What say you?
In the future of our children, our grandkids, she's, just trying to hide her record by doing this price control situation that she's talking about. I believe it's like the next Fauci move. It's the next, let's see how far we can take this with control of Americans, these weak Americans that want government in their life like this overreaching of government. They're just trying to package her, Jeff, and sell her, but I just can't wait for the debate. Then her package, I think, will come unraveled, and we'll be able to see the real Kamala. Communist Kamala.
That's what she is. She's Commie Kamala, or as I like to call her now, Comrade Kamala. I can spell it, though, with a K instead of a C. She's right. Comrade Kamala. That's what she is. Heather, thank you very, very much for that call. And look, she's got a major liability on top of everything else. Listen to Donald Trump. He ripped her apart in Pennsylvania. Roll cut 22. Mike.
Yesterday, Kamala laid out her so-called economic plan. She says she's going to lower the cost of food and housing starting on day one. But day one for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. So why didn't she do it then? So this is day 1305. We're at 1305. So why isn't she doing it now? Why doesn't she get away from her nice little place with her wonderful husband, go to Washington and do it now? You could do it right now.
Bingo. No, really, bingo. She's been in power for 3.5 years. She could have lowered inflation any time over the last 3.5 years. She could have lowered the price of food, of groceries, of housing, everything for the last 3.5 years. Instead, she's responsible for the inflation. And now she's going to fix it? 7:32 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, listen now to Kamala Harris, Commie Kamala, or Comrade Kamala as I like to call her, unveiling Kamalaism. Okay, or communism, as now many are calling it, because it's her version of American-style communism. Now, she's now vowing that if she wins the election in November, they're going to build 3 million new affordable homes to deal with the housing crisis, to help deal with the fact now that housing prices are going up. They're becoming too expensive for too many buyers, especially younger buyers. Listen now. Roll cut 2, Mike.
By the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class.
Have you noticed these lemmings? And all these Democrats and libs are lemmings. How they just mindlessly, like trained seals, clap no matter what she says. No matter how outrageous or preposterous or ridiculous or frankly moronic it is. It doesn't matter. No matter how stupid it is. They go, yeah, Kamala, yeah. Like trained seals. Well, how is she going to help people afford a home? And this target of 3 million, they just are like a rabbit out of a hat. They just pick this target, arbitrarily. 1 million. Make it 2. What the hell? 3 million. What the hell? This is their strategy. You and I are going to pay for people's down payments for their homes. You don't believe me? Here it is. Roll cut 2A, Mike.
In addition, while we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home.
Now, if this is, by the way, immensely expensive, it's going to be put on the debt. It's like student loans. The Biden-Harris regime has literally wiped away, paid off hundreds of billions of dollars in student debt. All of it illegal because the Supreme Court ruled you cannot pay off people's student loans. In open defiance and contravention of the Supreme Court, they have done it. Well, now, we're not just going to pay your student loan debt. We're going to help you buy a house. Now, let me just say this, and then I want to go right back to the phone line. 617-266-6868 is the number. Why should I have to pay? Why should you have to pay? Why should we have to pay for someone else to put a $25,000 down payment on their home? How is this fair? Let me just state the obvious point. How is this fair to say, I don't know, me? You don't think Grace and I were struggling? You don't think we rented for years and we were struggling in Washington, D.C. to make it? D.C. is extremely expensive city to live in. And then we eventually scrounged and saved and put enough money away for a down payment, and we got our first home. It was a townhome, small townhome. So what about me? How many of you sacrificed to make that down payment for your first home? Who helped you? So are we going to get reimbursed? Instead, we've got to pay out of our pocket to help someone else get $25,000 for their down payment on their first home? Why? Why? It's grossly unfair. I never got that. You never got that. I can tell you this, Sandy Shack never got that. Most people I know never got that. They had to pay their own down payments. No one helped them unless it was their parents or family, but outside of that, the government didn't say, hey, what do you need? You think I could have, you don't think I could have used $25,000 to help me with my down payment on our first home? You better believe it. So they're now going to force us to pay for other people's down payments on their first homes. Why? She's buying votes. It's naked vote buying with our taxpayer money. And I go back to this. This is the allure of communism. This is why this thing, Chavez won in Venezuela as an example. Because now people are like, well, hey, yeah, I'll take 25,000. I'd love to. I'm in a 2-bedroom, whatever. I'm in a 2-room apartment. And my wife and I, or my husband and I, or my boyfriend and I, or my girlfriend and I, or whatever, my partner and I, we'd love to get out of this apartment. Well, hey, they're going to give us $25K for a down payment. What the hell? We're out of here. Sweetheart, let's go. Let's move. Who caused the housing crisis? They did. Why? They caused the inflation. They triggered the inflation, which led to high interest rates. That's why it's so unaffordable for so many people to buy a home, because interest rates are too high. Well, who's responsible for that? They are. Again, who caused all of this? They did. And now, again, they offered themselves up as the solution, which is only going to make things worse. Because what do you think is going to happen? Then the pressure is going to be inexorable. It's not just first-time home buyers. It's inevitable. They're going to say, okay, well, now anybody who wants to go buy a home, you get $25,000 for a down payment. You see how this scam works? And then, you know what? not 25, 35. No, I'll match your 35 and raise it. $50,000. Hey, I'll give you $75K. Hey, I'll give you $100,000. You see how this thing goes? And by the way, every economist is saying, you put $25,000 housing subsidies out there, you pay people $25,000, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to drive up inflation even more. Because people who normally can't afford a home, as I said, say that young couple living together in an apartment, now are going to go out and buy a home that they normally can't afford. But with this $25,000 down payment that you and I are paying for, suddenly, yep, we can afford it, sweetie. So they're just going to make the problem even worse. The cure is worse than the disease. The solution is worse than the problem. So let me throw this on the table. Should we pay for home buyers $25,000 down payment on their first home? Should we have to be paying for people to to give them $25,000 as a down payment for their first home? I think it's economically reckless. I think it's immoral. I don't think you should not be paying for me to buy a home. I should not be paying for you to buy a home. I think it's grossly immoral. And what makes it even doubly immoral is that I never got that benefit. You never got that benefit. I was able to buy a home without a $25,000 check from the government. And you were able to buy your first home without a $25,000 check from the government. So why can't these people get their own home without a $25,000 check from the government? Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868. Okay, I don't want to rush it. So let me just set the table. Kamala Harris now puts forth a communist or neo-Marxist, however you want to call it, economic plan. It calls now for price controls on food and all food production. 2, it now will set up the Federal Trade Commission to go after what they call as price gouging among businesses, corporations, grocery stores, without defining what price gouging is. And now, $25,000 government checks to anybody who buys their first home, $25,000 as a down payment. Should you and I be paying for people's down payment for a home? I say hell no. It's Kamala communism, my friends. Welcome to the revolution. 7:51, actually 7:50, my bad, on the great WRKO, Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer, 617-266-6868. Okay, she wants sweeping Soviet-style price controls on food, grocery stores, food production. Every economist now has come out and said it's going to lead to massive food shortages and maybe even starvation and famine. It's a disastrous idea. She now also wants to give people within her first 100 days, should she win, she wants to give new homeowners a $25,000 direct government check to help as a down payment to help them buy a new home. Should you be supporting someone else? Most likely they've already gotten their student loans paid off, and now they're going to get $25,000 cash money, baby, from you and me to buy their first home. It's unfair. I never got that kind of help. You never got that kind of help. And what do you think is going to happen, by the way, as many of you are pointing out, to home prices? They're just going to jack it up another $25K. All this is going to do is lead, to more inflation. 617-266-6868. She's playing Santa Claus with our money. And the strategy now is just bribe different voting blocks. Young people can't afford a home? No problem. Here's $25,000. We'll chip in with the down payment. It literally, now, by the way, Kamala Harris, this is now her official position on illegals. Every single illegal alien, you want to talk about a bribe, here it is. Every single illegal alien in the United States will not only get full citizenship, amnesty, but they will get free, i.e. taxpayer-funded health care, and free student tuition, free college. Americans won't get free college. Americans don't get free health care. But illegals now will not only get government papers, they will not only get a passport and citizenship, they will get free health care and free college tuition. $1.7 trillion. That's what all of this is going to cost us and counting. On top of a $2 trillion deficit. She's going to bury us and good. 617-266-6868 is the number. John in Dunstable. Thanks for holding, John, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Jeff, since President Trump was in office, I'll tell you this much, that 700-pound steer was under $1,000. Today at the sale, the exact same steer is over $2,000. Now, I buy hay. It's doubled in 4 years, Jeff. My hay is doubled. Grain is up 80%. And what's the reason for that, Jeff? It's Biden, Harris, and the communist Democrats. Now, we have our farms are dwindling, Jeff. Our farms are dwindling. It's not only the fuel. It's not only the fuel that's brought prices up, but our farms are dwindling. China's bought a lot of our farms. Their grain and products are going to China. They're not staying in this country. It should have never been allowed to happen. Gates is bought in farms, and nothing's being done with the farms, except he's trying to kill American people by starving them to death. Miraculously, Jeff, if you remember, farms have been burnt to the ground, but we don't hear anything of what happened. We know what happened, but we don't really know because no one's talking about it. So what's happening now, Jeff, with her is, and you said it, it's going to be starvation. What happens when people starve, Jeff? They can control them. They can control them,
That's right.
Jeff. If people are starving, they can control the people because they have no food. And this is what's going to happen to our country. I'm warning everybody. I've been warning everybody that if she gets in and these communists get in, it's over. And we're going to either have to do something about it, or we're going to starve to death. So it's not. Go ahead,
John. Here's my fear, and you're completely right. Look, John, here's my fear. Okay, it's obvious now what they want. Okay, they've really smoked themselves out. It's now clear what the Democrat Party is all about. In fact, look, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but let me just mention it now because it goes directly to your point. Joe Biden is speaking tonight at the Democratic Convention. Tonight. Not Thursday night. Remember, Thursday night is the big night. It's the final night. So you would think that Joe Biden would be speaking Thursday night, introducing Kamala Harris and saying, I'm the president. She was my vice president. She's now the nominee. I'm passing the baton off to her. And, she's, Kamala, finish our job. No. they're going to bury him on Monday night. And the reason why they're going to bury him on Monday night is because they want to cover up their coup. This was a coup. They overthrew, and by the way, now even the New York Times Maureen Callahan has now come out with a piece that officially now came out and said, Maureen Dowd, forgive me, Maureen Callahan is a New York Post, I'm confusing them. Maureen Dowd came out with a huge piece in the New York Times saying, quote, a coup is a coup. It's still a coup. So even they're now acknowledging they overthrew Joe Biden. He won 87% of the votes. He won the primary. 14 million Democrats voted for him. Kamala Harris never got a single vote. Period. Full stop. Full stop. If there was an open competitive primary, the New York Times even admits it. Kamala Harris would have lost. She would have lost, say Biden drops out. She would have lost to Gavin Newsom. She would have lost to Gretchen Whitmer. She would have lost to, I could go on, Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama. She would have finished dead last. Okay? She would have been destroyed in any Democratic primary. So, this was a coup. They now have to cover up the coup. So they're going to stick the old man, okay, as they're now calling him. They're going to stick him on Monday night, which I've never heard of before. You want to talk about a slap in the face. This is the ultimate slap in the face. Because they're now going to go for their full communist revolution. It's going to be Tim Walz Wednesday, Kamala Thursday. And this is my fear, is that now they're going to go and steal the election. In fact, I got a ton of stories. If I don't get to them today, I promise I will get to them tomorrow. They've already been caught now stealing. Illegals are being registered. They've already got illegals on voter rolls. They're being caught now left, right, and center. The steal is already on. And they're offering us starvation and famine. Their first 100 days, that's what they're going to offer us. They're essentially offering us Soviet-style communism. This is a recipe for civil war. I'm choosing my words now very, very, very carefully. Because what's going to happen is, with these fake push polls, to try to make this veneer of stealing plausible, is that the electorate will not accept the results of the election if they declare Kamala Harris the winner. The American people will know it was stolen, and not just that it was stolen, but we all now know what's coming for us should they install her in power. And what they're doing, this is so dangerous and so reckless and so irresponsible. They are really now laying the groundwork. I'm talking for serious political violence. And by the way, everywhere price controls have been tried, not only has it led to famine and food shortages and starvation, it has led to a violent backlash. Violent backlash. Because people are hungry. So they take to the streets. And then the authorities crack down. So you're not only going to have a stolen election, we know that the hammer and sickle is coming. That price controls and starvation and food shortages and long lines at the grocery stores are coming. You are going to see it's going to be very destabilizing. So this is my fear, John. You're completely right. They've driven up the price of everything, whether it's livestock, cattle, feed for and grain for animals, hay, you name it. That's why prices have gone up. Here, look, there is a Bureau of Labor Statistics. They had to admit, okay, and the San Francisco Federal Reserve did an in-depth study. They said, well, no, food producers, their costs went up 19.5%. And this was passed off to grocery stores. And all grocery stores did was pass those costs off to their consumers. That's it. That's it. Because look here, I like to shop at Stop and Shop. It's close, it's convenient. John, you got multiple stops and shops now closing in Massachusetts. They can't stay in business because the profit margins are so low. You think they want higher prices? Higher prices means less customers. Less customers mean less revenue. Less revenue when you're working on a 1-2% profit margin. That's the kiss of death. So grocery stores are already struggling. Some are already going under because they had to pass these high costs off to consumers at the level of the grocery stores. What do you think is going to happen when this lunatic in her first 100 days starts with the price gouging, the price controls, starts going after food producers, farmers, grocery stores? It's going to be panic. It's going to be bedlam. And have we forgotten the supply chain crisis just a couple of years ago? By the way, who gave us that supply chain crisis? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. With that idiot Pete Buttigieg. Remember the lines of all those cargo ships going back miles and miles and miles? And where's Buttigieg? He's literally on paternity leave. Breastfeeding his baby with some kind of a plastic female breast. And he's disappeared for months. He's just gone. He's just gone. So this is what they have in store for us. Now, I'm telling you, God is my witness. No way in hell does a ticket like this win any normal mainstream election. It's impossible. It's impossible. You could run Mickey Mouse against them and they win. Mickey Mouse wins. Who's going to vote for starvation and famine? Who's going to vote for more inflation? Who's going to vote for more of an open border? Who's going to vote for giving illegal aliens citizenship and free health care and free college? Who would do that in their right mind? Who would vote literally for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars added to the national debt? You got to be seriously effed up in the head. Pardon my French. They have to steal it now. They have to steal it. And this time, we're going to know that they stole it. There's going to be no getting around it now. And that's when the rubber hits the road. What do you say, John?
Jeff, I think you're 100% correct. And I say that I think I said it at the beginning. It's all by design to destroy us, Jeff. And I just, you know, she has no clue. She was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and she has no clue what things cost or anything. And she has no right if a dozen eggs are $6 for jumbo eggs. She has no idea whether it costs $5 for the eggs, and there has to be a little profit, or no one stays in business. So she has no right to say. That's why we have coupons, and we can make our own decision. We can shop here, there, or wherever, and we get the best buy that we can get for the best bang for our buck. And I think it's the destruction, Jeff, of our country. I honestly think they're going to cheat. I don't think they're going to install President Trump. And it is going to come down to a civil war if there's any men left in the country.
John, thank you very much for that call. I really appreciate it. Here, let me just make one last point, because this is the end game. Trust me, this is the end game. They want the government to take over all the grocery stores and all the food production facilities and eventually all the farmland. And I think they're going to sell most of it to China. They're going to sell it to China or to the globalists like Bill Gates. Okay, that's the ultimate play. But if the government controls the grocery stores, in other words, John made a very good point. Whatever you may think of grocery stores, okay, the facts are facts. Shaw's, and by the way, we have a lot of people outside of the New England area. So, I'm talking like our version of Kroger's or Safeway. So those bigger national chains. You can say whatever you want about Shaw's, but, muffins at times, I'm just giving an example. Muffins are cheaper at Shaw's than they are, say, at Stop and Shop. But I'll get fruits cheaper at Stop and Shop than, say, at Big Y. Or, whatever. In other words, you can shop and say, you know what, there's a really good deal on peanut butter at, whatever, Market Basket. So I'll go to Market Basket. The point is, you still have competition, and that keeps prices relatively low and the quality relatively high. But what happens when you have a monopoly? And that's what they want. They want a government monopoly. Once you have a government monopoly, and that's what you have inevitably in Venezuela, in the former Soviet Union, in Cuba, in China. See, they implement the price controls. They wipe out the grocery stores, chronic food shortages. We must step in, comrade. The people are going hungry. We must step in, the state, the government. So they ride to the rescue and they say, no, we're taking over everything now. So now they take over. You have one place and only one place you can go buy your food, the government. What do you think happens then? Quality goes right down the toilet. And there are chronic shortages. Now, that's the inevitable result of her policy. Now, when you even have the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC and NBC News and CBS, when you've got all of her media allies who've been covering for her from day one, saying, no, you really want to walk this one back. No, this one is a bullet to the head. Don't do this. And she still won't do it? She's still doubling, tripling down? They want their communist revolution. And that's why they're planning to steal it in November. This is Obama's ultimate fourth term. It is now the end of America. The final transformation. 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree. Mark in the great state of New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Mark, and welcome.
Hey, buddy.
Mark, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm going to go hunt and maybe grow my own veggies and all that stuff just to get away from all this craziness. But, Jeff, there's something else here, though, that I don't think you've seen yet, and that's the UN-backed Agenda 2030, Jeff. Agenda 2030 is the takeover of everything by the UN. It's housing, food, energy, education, media. It's all controlled by the government, Jeff. And if you look at every policy that she's pushing, they're all going to end up with 2030.
Well, I think that's the ultimate. I think you're dead on, Mark. I think that's the ultimate game plan. I think there's no question. And Mark, I've got to ask you, do you think the American people are gullible and stupid enough to buy into this communist, Kamala's communist plan? Or do you think politically this is a big loser for her?
Well, anybody with half a brain can see that this is going to cause massive price increases and it's going to cause shortages and it's going to cause everything else, Jeff. But I think, unfortunately, the people have been so brainwashed that government is their friend, Jeff, that a lot of them are going to buy into this crap. And a lot of them believe this garbage that they tell them, when they hear it every day from their, trusted media sources that,
Mark, can you do me a favor? Can you please hang on? Mark has a crystal ball. I want to tap into that crystal ball. I want to ask all of you, Kamala's communism, like, no like? 820 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay. This is from the New York Times columnist, staff writer. David Brooks, okay, a rabid anti-never Trumper. This is what he said about Kamala Harris and her coming out with Soviet-style price controls. Quote, "It's impossible to exaggerate how bad this policy is." This is now the New York Times. The New York Times, David Brooks. He's expressing disbelief. Like he's just shocked that she would advocate for price controls. Now, I played the cut earlier of Catherine Rampell at CNN, but he quotes her. Quote, "Catherine Rampell had a good line that if your opponent is calling you a communist, don't lead with price controls. We have seen it happen in Venezuela and the Soviet Union. Price controls do not work." And he says, not only will price controls make things infinitely worse when it comes to inflation, but he says she's an economic illiterate. He says that's the most frightening thing of all. Quote, "But the core problem is," and when he says it is the price controls. "But the core problem is it expresses a level of economic illiteracy that is surprising in a responsible Democratic candidate." And then Brooks goes on, I don't want to go too much into the column, but Brooks goes on to write, quote, "The idea behind greedflation is we had all those years of low inflation, and I guess people were not greedy then. Then magically they all got greedy and start price gouging at Kroger's and Harris Teeter's, H-E-B, Safeway, and there's this massive price gouging." And he goes on to say, no, of course that's not what happened. That's not why inflation surged. I'm reading directly now. Inflation surged because of the pandemic, which screwed up supply chains and productivity. The Biden administration overstimulated the economy. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. And then Brooks goes on to write that Kamala Harris, as vice president, supported every bit of Bidenomics. He goes, that's why Trump is calling it Kamalanomics, because Kamalanomics and Bidenomics are one and the same. And look, this is the killer. She can't run from this. I'm quoting Brooks now, New York Times. Furthermore, Kamala Harris passed the tie-breaking votes in the Senate on Biden's signature pieces of economic legislation, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan. In other words, the $5 trillion in combined spending. And it was that massive spending that led to this massive inflation. And according to Brooks, this is how he ends. The worst thing about Kamala Harris blaming greedy corporations for inflation is she is probably more guilty than any other elected official for causing it in the first place. So she causes this inflation with this reckless spend, borrow, a print policy. That's what it was. Spend trillions and trillions of dollars, racking up massive deficits and debt, and then have the Federal Reserve just keep printing money to help pay for all this. And of course, we have 40-year highs in inflation. So she causes everything to go up 30, 40, 50, 60%. And then she turns around and says, okay, we're just going to freeze everything now. Control every single price at every grocery store, every farm, every food production facility. And if that leads to shortages and eventually even higher prices, because it's inevitable, then like Argentina or Venezuela, too bad. Because I'll tell you this, she won't be starving. Tim Walz won't be starving. Obama and Biden and the Clintons won't be starving. You know who's going to be starving, my friends? you and me. Please listen to what I'm telling you right now. Please, I'm not asking you. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. In November, vote like your life depends on it and that of your family. Because I'm telling you, it does. These two whack jobs, Commie Kamala and Tampon Tim, must never be allowed to enter the White House again. I'm telling you, if they enter the White House, we are so screwed, it's not even funny. Mel in New York. Thanks for holding, Mel, and welcome.
Hey, yes.
Mel.
Yes, good morning, Jeff. Thank you for taking. Hey, yes, good morning, Jeff. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Yes. There was a couple callers back, and he was talking in regards to Bill Gates buying up all sorts of farmland, millions of acres of farmland in this country, and the CCP buying up farmland in this country right next to our military bases and our, all of our sensitive areas. We in this country, we have what is called, I guess, not what I guess, but I know, and
Mark, Mel in New York. We lost Mark. I was going to go to Mark, but we lost him. Anyway, Mel, hang on. I promise I'm going to come right to you right after this break. To the farmers out there, be very careful. She's coming for you. 8:33 on the great WRKO. I just want to express my apologies again to Mark in New Hampshire. We had a bit of a mix-up. I'm sorry we didn't get back to you, but you're always welcome to call the Kuhner Report. Mark, you're one of our best callers. Okay, Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868 is the number. Mel up in New York. Mel, you're in the horse business. You deal with horse racing, but also with farmland, agricultural land. And you're very worried about these price controls that Kamala says she will impose within the first 100 days of her presidency, should she win in November. Please, Mel, pick up where you left off.
Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, I'm very sorry the market couldn't hang on because I would have died to hear would have loved to hear what his opinions were. But in regards to what I was saying, eminent domain with all of Bill Gates is millions of acres of farmland, and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, buying up farmland here in America, close to our sensitive areas, government-sensitive areas. That we have a right as a federal government to repurchase those properties for nickels on the dollar. I think that's what should be President Trump's agenda, his policy to do when he does take the Oval Office, is to buy up all those properties, take them back, throw these Chinese communists out of this country. The UN should be shut down. All of these people should be ejected from our country, and start again. And the fact is, they're doing this on purpose. The Democrat parties, they're compelled main process. Take all these properties back, and just shut it down, put the roadblock up, because it's nothing that's conducive or beneficial to we the people here in America. I mean, Ray Charles can see that. So it has to be done. But you got, I don't know, Jim Jordan. He wants to send all these strongly worded letters to the opposite side and to the House. It's just insane. Not just him, but there's a lot of them. They talk a good game, but they don't produce anything. I'm kind of getting tired of it, Jeff. The only thing that I can see coming out of this, if we do not get the Oval Office through President Trump, we better load up and get ready, arm up, because you're going to need to protect yourself from your own gun.
Oh, no question. Mel, I mean, you bang, bang, bang on every single point. Look, I think we're going to win. I'm convinced we're going to win. I think we're going to swamp the polls. Now, I am going to be exposing a lot of this voter fraud, I promise. This week, I'm going to be covering the convention, obviously up in Chicago. But I'm also going to be exposing a lot of this voter fraud. So believe me, I'm not naive. The last thing I am is naive about this. I think there's so many of us now that it's going to be very hard for them to steal this election. They got to manufacture a lot of ballots, man, a lot of votes. There's so much opposition, and it's building every day. But you're right. She wins in November. If they can pull this thing off, you better protect yourself. And I'm not kidding. You better start learning to grow your own food. Start growing your own food. Learn how to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. And I'm number one in that, by the way. I don't have a garden. My parents did. My parents gardened. I don't garden to my detriment. I'm going to learn gardening. I'm serious. I'm going to have to. Because food shortages are inevitable. Okay. The only way they're not inevitable if she doesn't implement her price controls. But she's determined to do it. Walz is determined to do it. Her people around her are determined to do it. The Democrats are determined to do it. So they're going to do it within their first 100 days. So look, I'm telling you, man, I can't survive when food shortages. I'm like, what do you call not a city slicker. I'm a suburban slicker. So I'm not self-sufficient like you, Mel. I'm being serious. Or like many of you that listen to this show. I'm not. I should be, but I'm not. I don't hunt for my food. As Mark in New Hampshire says he can hunt for his food. I don't hunt for my food. I can't. I don't have a garden. I should have a garden. As I said, my mother, my father. By the way, Grace's mom, Grace's dad, they had, beautiful gardens. Man, you wouldn't believe. They grew cucumbers. They grew tomatoes. They grew lettuce. They grew carrots. It's unbelievable. My dad actually had fruit trees on top of the garden. He literally grew apples. Beautiful, delicious apples. I mean, he even grew grapes. I mean, up in Canada, the season is not the best, but they weren't bad. I mean, a little sour, but they weren't bad. My point is, and by the way, my father was a great hunter. So if we needed, if my father, was a much younger man and not battling Parkinson's, hey, he'd survive this. So you're going to have to start learning survival skills. I'm serious. I mean, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get really ugly. Now, to your larger point, Mel, we have to kick these Chinese communist front companies and corporations out of the United States. You're right. They're buying up massive tracts and swaths of farmland. They're buying up rich agricultural farmland all across the country because they want to control our supply chains, our food supply. And it's time now to have a real Cold War with Communist China. I don't mean we go to war with them. Absolutely not. I don't want World War III. But what I mean is they're an economic enemy, a political, geopolitical, economic enemy. They should not own our vital research and development. They should not own key industries, and they certainly should not own our farmland. Kick the communist Chinese out of this country from those that are directly tied to the regime in Beijing. And I know that's one of the great things Ron DeSantis has done in Florida, and I think Trump needs to do it on a national scale. Because believe me, they're going to be the number one people buying up farmland under Kamala Harris. Now, I'm telling you, Biden was bad as an agent of China. Tim Walz is even worse. This is a guy who has traveled to China, communist China, over 30 times. Apparently now they pay for his private jet travel. He went there and he taught. He was a teacher for a year in communist China. As I said at the beginning of the show, I want to repeat it. You cannot teach in communist China without being a fellow traveler. If you're any kind of a non-communist in any way, shape, or form, you are not allowed to educate or instruct children. It is verboten. Verboten. And people who worked with him are now coming out and saying, oh no, he was a huge Maoist. The guy's a huge Maoist. He admires Mao. This is the guy that she picked to be her VP. I mean, come on. It tells you everything you need to know. Her father was a Marxist. Her mother was a Marxist. Her tutors and those that helped educate her were all Marxists. Her political tutor, Obama, is a Marxist. And now her top VP pick is a Marxist, literally a Maoist, who went to communist China and said, I've seen the future and this is it. And now they're telling us, yep, well, communist China had price controls. You're getting price controls. Communist China confiscated guns. We're going to confiscate your guns. Yep. Communist China started to take over everything in the economy and society. That's what we're going to do. Communist China abolished free speech. That's what we're going to do. I mean, after a while, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and acts like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a freaking duck. Trump needs to sound a 5-alarm fire. Comrade Kamala is the greatest threat to America we've ever had. 850 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868. You know, Sandy made an absolutely brilliant suggestion while we were off air. She said, Jeff, doesn't Ashton love to garden? I go, yeah. I mean, he loves playing outdoors. He loves working outdoors. And when he puts his mind to something, you know, seriously, the kid's a workhorse. It's just getting him to work. But once he's working, he's good. She says, well, put him to the garden. Have him start gardening. Sandy, you're a genius. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Now it's, you know, we're entering fall soon. It's too late, but that's okay. In the spring, should Kamala win, I'm going to have Ashton do a big garden for me. And then, you know, and Sandy says, you know, Jeff, you can also bond with Ashton. You know, you guys can do it together. I'm like, well, when he works outside, like when I have him weeding or trimming or whatever, I'll sit on a lawn chair with a cooler, cold drinks, you know, a couple of cold Diet Cokes, Coke Zeros, bottles of water, and, you know, and then I'll be reading a book. And Ashton is working. I'll go, come on, once in a while. I'll go, come on, Ashton, let's go. Let's pick it up a little bit here. Let's go. I don't have all day. Yeah, Mike says you like the idea so much because you're lazy. And then he'll come by and I'll go, hey, son, come on, crack open a Diet Coke. You know what I mean? Here, have a sip, son, relax. You know, you're sweating all, just take it easy, have a seat beside Daddy. We talk for a couple minutes. I go, listen, Ashton, time is a wasting here, son. Day's not getting any earlier. It's not getting any younger. Let's go. Get back out there. Exactly, Sandy. What are children for if not to do manual labor? I'm all for child labor. 617. So it's a great way for us to bond. And I'm telling you, he's really good with his hands. A lot better than his old man. So, you know what? He'll build us a beautiful garden. 617. So he's my plan B. Should she win in November, Ashton is my plan B. Verna in Arlington. Thanks for holding, Verna, and welcome.
Thank you very much for taking the call.
Hi, Verna.
And thank you for everything that you're doing and exposing all the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to come in there about this, you know, the communist, Kamala communist, basically takeover plan. And she's just so ignorant. She has no idea what she's doing, obviously. I just want to say that, as you know, I lived in the Soviet Union for 3 years as a student after high school in the early 70s and my late teens, and I experienced all of this firsthand. All of it with the whole price, the whole food thing. They could not sell food. They didn't have food to sell, and it was, the underground where you would buy food if you could, and then you had to spend money. And even the buildings, when they built apartment buildings or homes or whatever, they stole material. The buildings would fall apart. That's all part of the communist system. There was just no quality of building. And I just wonder if people remember the McCarthy era back here in the United States. Was that back in the 50s, I believe? My father was a card-carrying communist member. It's crazy. I grew up in that whole mentality myself as well, but I distanced from it several years ago, and I'm so grateful. But the Soviet Union was a perfect example. I also had a relative that went to Venezuela to make money, and he became a millionaire. And that was years ago when it was a beautiful country. So I just wanted to put that out there. The whole communist system, it takes advantage of people, and everything goes wrong. I mean, we had to go to, basically under the table to buy food when I lived in the Soviet Union. And I was there as a student in my late teens, so to me it was all like a big adventure, and the folks there would teach me what to do. But it was awful. I mean, you couldn't find toilet paper. You couldn't find cotton in the stores. The shelves were bare. They would stand in lines twice a year for toilet paper. We used newspaper in the toilets, to go to the bathroom. And that was all truth and reality. If you talk to someone who lived in the Soviet Union, I had a relative there, too, that lived there, that one time one of the relatives got out and was able to visit the United States, and he literally said, "Oh my goodness, you guys are like 500 years ahead of us." He could not believe what he was seeing. So I just want to put that out there, folks. For liberals out there, Democrats out there, do not believe what they're saying. Do not believe this. And also, as a communist, atheist Democrat, which is what a lot of them are, there's no morals. They lie. They lie, and they lie, and they lie. And so I just want to put it out there. Jeff, please keep putting this out there. Thank you for sharing about Walls, because he has traveled to China over 30 times, and he's a communist. And I just want to put it out there also that the movie Reagan is coming out at the end of this month, and when he's the one that convinced Gorbachev to take down the wall to stop the Soviet Union. And so there's reasons for this, people, and I just want to put that out there. So, Jeff, keep exposing all of this stuff. Like you said, you're not naive. You know the history behind this. Keep exposing it so people can hear it, and I hope this information can get out to more people out there in the public.
Amen. Verna, thank you for an outstanding call and for sharing your story with us. Please don't be a stranger. Call again, Verna. 617. She's completely right. Completely right. I know because I witnessed it myself when my parents would take me back behind the Iron Curtain to visit, our family, and it was the exact same thing in the former Yugoslavia, what is today Croatia. 617-266-6868 is the number, and I remember my uncle, who lived behind the Iron Curtain. He took care of he was my mother's older brother, and he took care of my grandmother, my mother's mother and father, so he didn't defect, right? He didn't flee the way my mother did. He stayed behind, but he was able to get out for a trip to visit my mother. This was in the 70s. And when he landed at the airport in Montreal, he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe how the shops were full. He couldn't believe how people were dressed. He couldn't believe the cars that people drove. He went nuts when he saw our house. He couldn't believe all the amenities. And we were very middle class. Very middle class. And he goes, it's like I've died and gone to heaven. And, he fell in love with North American pizza. And I felt very bad for him because he so loved it. Because the food was so delicious and it was so plentiful that he would keep asking, is it okay if we order more pizza? Do you mind if I have another? I mean, this is so good. And my father was like, yeah, listen, I'll buy you the whole freaking pizza store. The whole pizzeria, because he felt so bad for him. But I mean, loved pizza. And everything. I mean, my dad made him steaks on the barbecue, and the grocery store the full North American, where everything is, the shelves are lined with all kinds of food. He would just walk and walk and walk. It was a bizarre thing. He goes, nah, if you don't mind, I just want to stay here and observe. He couldn't believe it. He just couldn't believe it. The meat section full, cheese full, bread full, cereal full, milk full, everything full. Just stocked, completely stocked. He couldn't believe it. Anyway, he said it was his dream. He had to go back, obviously. He had a wife, he had a child. But, and then we would visit occasionally. And this was years later. And he would just talk about that trip he took to Montreal. It was 4 weeks he stayed with us. And it's like that was it. According to him, that was the best moment of his entire life, was those 4 weeks in freedom and in prosperity. And we just take it for granted. We run to the grocery and we complain about, whatever. Oh, this box of cereal, whatever. Special K berries. Oh, they ran out of the red berries. And my kids will complain. Because they love that. Special K red berries. I go, well then, just get the vanilla Special K or the regular Special K or the blueberry Special K. No, Daddy, we want the red berry Special K. I mean, like little things like that, people complain about. And all this guy did, my uncle, was just wander the aisles and marvel at all the food. 617-266-6868. Well, soon, if they can install Harris and Waltz, we're going to be just like my uncle. It's going to be survival of the fittest. So when we go to other countries, they'll go, wow, you guys have full grocery stores. How'd you guys pull this off? Tommy in West Virginia. Thanks for holding, Tommy, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Tommy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's get back to the inflation, what caused inflation. What no one's talking about is the amount of theft. Now, Kamala, when she was Attorney General, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a referendum question in California when she was in office there of where if you steal under $1,000 worth of merchandise, they're not going to arrest you. They're not going to charge you. I live in Brockton. I have a house in Brockton. They had to shut down a Star Market on essentially Route 28, Montello. And the reason why, the amount of theft that was going on there. And it wasn't that one. It was the one on 23 on Torrey Street. But that one got shut down. And, I'm surprised to hear David Brooks, who writes for the Times, to come out and call Kamala Harris basically price control is pretty much failed. I'm glad to hear that coming out of the New York Times. I'm surprised they let him write it. But, with Donald Trump, his economic plan, he brought up a couple of good points. One, he said we need 5 more refineries in this country. We have not built a new refinery since 1976 in the United States. And every time we have a hurricane in the Gulf region, what ends up happening? Gas prices go up. Why? Because we can't produce more gasoline. And the other thing that Trump has said, to his credit, to lower prices, if we get diesel down to $2 a gallon, that is going to really lower the cost of shipping. And one thing that started this inflation, besides the pandemic, was when Ukraine was invaded by Russia and the sanctions happened, and we had $5 a gallon gas prices and $7 a gallon diesel prices. I mean, things just went crazy. The other thing that with Trump, he's going to relax regulations, unnecessary regulations. And, I'm a frequent talk radio caller, and I'm going to try and call this one progressive on the low end, on the high end of the AM dial in a local station, and see if I can't talk some reason to him, because everything points to China with regards to progressive Democrats. And I truly believe a guy like Tim Walz, he's probably gone, like you said, 30 times to China. He's seen the wonderful train systems they have, the wonderful massive dam they have on the Yangtze River, where who cares if they flooded 5,000-year-old villages, okay? China does whatever they want to do. And when I try to have these conversations about climate change, these progressives, when you explain to them that the United States are coal-fired power plants, we have 210 that are active in this country. We have scrubbers on them. They're not belching out ash into the atmosphere. China has over 1,100 power plants that they're not mandated to have scrubbers on them. Remember the term acid rain of the 80s, Jeff?
Yes.
Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we don't have that anymore in this country. Why? Because Congress passed the Clean Air Act of the mid-'80s, of where you have to put scrubbers on those power plants. I worked on one at the Harrison Power Plant in Lumberport, West Virginia, back in the late 80s when they were installing one. They were mandated to have those. China doesn't do that. And even before the pandemic, you had people in China running around wearing masks because the pollution is so bad there from the coal. But, I really think what's going on here is the Cloward Piven strategy of where they just want to bankrupt this country, just run it into the ground and start all over again. And, and unfortunately, if you listen to some people on NPR, you'll see that, something, these people that call them progressives, behind every progressive is a closet case totalitarian. And you've had some great callers. That one guy talking about a steer that used to cost $1,000 prior to the pandemic now is $2,000. It's the same thing with corn. I feed wild game down here, deer and turkeys. Before the pandemic, $7 for a 50-pound bag of corn. It's now $15 down here. And what the guy who runs the local feed and grain store said after the pandemic, when it went up to $10, he said, China is buying our grain lock, stock, and barrel all throughout the country. I can't get it. And that's what's happening. All roads lead back to China, as far as I'm concerned, with these two. And for her not to choose Shapiro, which Pennsylvania is a key state. He's a very popular Democrat governor that actually is a centrist. But you're right. I really think they're going to steal this election. And I truly believe that if they do, it's 1861 all over again. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Tommy. Look, you're finding out now why she didn't choose Josh Shapiro. And I'm going to talk about this much more tomorrow, I promise. But if you look at the Democratic National Convention, we're talking literally tens of thousands of radical pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, Antifa protesters are now descending upon Chicago. Chicago's a war zone right now. You have to see the images. I've never seen so many police on the streets. I mean, it's like a fortress. And the irony is, because they're anticipating now, there's going to be riots, there's going to be there's going to be fights with police, there's going to be violence. Chicago is going to burn. If they don't really crack down, Chicago is going to burn. And it's going to be 1968 redux all over again. But the height of hypocrisy, you can't make this up. They have built a massive wall, a fence wall, a huge, thick fence wall around the entire convention center in Chicago. And not only have they built, in other words, to keep the protesters and keep everybody else out, but not only have they built this massive wall, to get in, what do you think you have to show? Take a guess. ID. No ID, you can't get into Kamala Harris's convention. The wall keeps everybody else out. So, when we want to build a wall to protect our country from illegals and from criminals and from drugs and from terrorists, or when we say, hey, you want to vote, you need to show ID. racist. Oh my God, this is voter suppression. This is racism. But when the Democrats say, no, when we have to protect ourselves and our leaders, then a nice, big, juicy wall, then that's fine, no problemo. And to come in, like, by the way, like every other Kamala rally, you want to go to a rally for Kamala, you got to show ID, baby. Then that's not racist. Then showing ID. See, now showing ID is not racist. You phonies, you frauds, you. But to bring it back exactly to Tommy's point, you watch. Chicago is going to descend into bedlam. In fact, already, businesses in downtown Chicago boarded up. Business owners have come out and said, no. The cops aren't going to protect our businesses. They're not going to protect shoppers. In fact, everybody who works in the downtown area in Chicago, all the employees, have been told by their companies, their employers, stay home. You are not safe coming to downtown Chicago. Don't come into work this week. So they can't protect the people who are going to be working in Chicago, the shoppers of Chicago, the businesses of Chicago. They're being all boarded up. Contrast that with the Republican National Convention in Wisconsin. I mean, yeah, there was security, no question. But Sandy can testify. We were together. We walked around. All the businesses were open. People were shopping. People were eating at restaurants. Everybody was working. They didn't shut the city down and board up businesses. And this is Democrat on Democrat. Remember, these aren't the Christian white nationalists that are descending on Chicago. This isn't the Proud Boys descending on Chicago. These aren't Trump supporters, MAGA, ultra MAGA. They're not the ones descending on Chicago. These are Democrats. These are progressives. This is Antifa and the pro-Palestinian mob, baby. These are Democrat voters. 617-266-6868. As I texted a friend of mine hours ago, I said, you watch. If the Democrats are not careful and the police are not careful, Chicago is going to burn. David in Medford. Thanks for holding, David, and welcome.
Hello there, you hear me?
I can hear you, David. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. And you sound pretty good like you always do.
Thank you, David.
A little thing I'd like to say that everyone keeps squawking about. All right?
Go ahead, David.
This is the United States of America.
Yes, I agree with you, David. David, hang on. I'm going to come right back to you, and we're going to pick up where we left off. Don't touch that dial. 919 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let's go right back to David in Medford. David, you were saying this is the United States of America. Please pick up where you left off.
It still is. And I understand that you probably hit the 50 states in this country, or the 51 Obama thinks we have. Listen, I want everyone to hear. 2016, we had a surprise election, and Trump beat out Hillary. We had 4 years of low stuff, food, gas. People made money. I made money. And pretty much no one bothered with us around the world. Then in 2020, us great Americans must have got an epiphany because we got hit with COVID. It was an attack by China. They knew about it, but what the hell? The United States government would go. Trump pretty much had it right, but he was a new person. In comes the Democrats in the Congress. The Congress, they're all traitors. We got a stolen election. Trump got pushed out because everybody hated his tweets. Now, how do you like the tweets now? Inflation, go find your food, go do this. We're the laughing stock of the world. You literally, the guy you voted in, literally got thrown out. And you Americans are still sitting around worrying about a Kamala Harris, who's even worse. At least she's talking straight talk. So I'm going to tell you something, America. You put Kamala Harris in, all you people, I have no love for you. I have no love for you. You people are stupid, and you're ruining the best country in the world. It will only last 4 years. But unfortunately, there may be the big V. And I really hate it because it would be disastrous. But that's because of all you voters in the 50 states. California, you're an idiot. Look what happened to you. Utah, for crying out loud. Mitt Romney, the biggest fake in the world. And then Maine. You give me Susan Collins and a bunch of independents that do nothing. And then you all are going to complain about freezing in winter because you have no oil or gas and your electricity's high. I don't care. So that's it. Here's the election. Make your pick. Thank you, Jeff.
David,
Bye-bye.
you drop the mic, David. Really, drop the mic. Look, really, the election now, it's very simple. It's communism or freedom. It's Venezuela or America. That's the pick. That's really now the pick. Do you want communism or do you want freedom? Do you want Venezuela or do you want America as we've always known it? And this is Obama's ultimate dream. This is all the dear leader. Look, the thing about Biden, he's a puppet. We know that. And why? Because he was so brain damaged. Okay, he had such serious cognitive mental decline. He just read the script that they put in front of him. They could control him. Kamala is the same thing. It's not that she's demented. She's stupid. So she's so stupid you can control her. She's an airhead. Plus, I'm telling you, she's a lush. The woman loves the bottle, and it's coming out more and more. She's been battling alcohol addiction now for a long time, and she's a pothead. So, you know, the substance abuse over many years, and the fact that she's still battling a serious battle with alcoholism. I'm telling you, the woman, they have to keep her hidden because she's often drunk. And the Trump campaign finally over the weekend started now to talk about all these stories that are surfacing that the woman is a lush. So I'm happy they're starting to finally expose who she really is. So we're going to, you know, now she's controllable as well because she's so stupid. But the guy who's pulling the strings is the dear leader. And remember what he said. He wants us to become a third world socialist hellhole. That was his goal from the beginning. That's the ultimate revenge. Dreams of my father, as he wrote in his so-called autobiography, which was written by Bill Ayers, but let that go. That his father said, we must overthrow the West, overthrow European colonialism, overthrow the white race, and make them become like we have been in the third world. And Dinesh D'Souza came out and said, having grown up in India, I know that kind of inflammatory, insightful, hateful rhetoric and ideology because I saw it in India as well. It is the cry of third world Marxists. Bring America down so they live the way we live. And they're no longer, quote unquote, superior to us. And this is his final move. He can control Kamala. He runs Kamala. He writes the script for Kamala. And he will turn us into a North American Venezuela. That's the ultimate goal. And they're now 80 days away. If you want to know the stakes, as David just laid it out, those are the stakes. Vince in Long Island. Thanks for holding, Vince, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. This is Vince formerly from Montreal.
Vince, buddy, how are you?
Okay, I listen to all the podcasts. I don't get the chance to listen live all the time, but anyhow, coming to the gardening situation, I wanted to mention, where are you going to get the fertilizer and the water with all the cutbacks?
Well, I mean, now you're putting a damper on everything here, Vince. I was kind of hoping my Ashton could do the gardening for me and I could survive, the upcoming food shortages and everything. But now, Vince, you have to bring logic and reason and reality into the conversation. Vince, can you please hang on? I want to come right back to you. Vince makes a great point. Where are we going to get the fertilizer? The water. 9:32 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, liberalism's worst nightmare, baby. Okay, let's go right back to my fellow paisan, Vince in Long Island, but formerly Vince from Montreal. Vince, you are making an excellent point. Okay, I may get Ashton to go out and do me a garden in the spring. I can get the labor, maybe even the know-how. But who the hell's, where am I going to get the fertilizer? Where am I going to get the water? Please pick up where you left off, Vince.
Transform America. I mean, what did they think was meant by that? These people treat our currency like it's monopoly money. They're completely clueless as to capitalism or market economies or anything like that. And by the way, I want to ask you, how is Rocky the dog doing?
Rocky's doing great. Rocky swims in the pool. Rocky sleeps with Ava in her bed every night. Rocky is putting on a few pounds. Daddy gives him cheese and a little bit of ham on top of his regular dog food. No, Vince, I got to tell you, Rocky, Rocky is America before Biden and Harris. Rocky's the only one living high on the hog, Vince.
Venezuela with the Rockies.
And you know how we used to be happy under Trump? That's how Rocky is now. His tail is always wagging. I look at him and I go, you remind me of the old America, Rocky. You're prosperous, you're rich, you're free, and you're happy.
As far as food supplies, I have like a 2-year stock of food supplies. And not because of Kamala, but because of inflation. Every time I see things on sale, I always stock up on it. And I think a while ago, I sent a couple of pictures to Dr. Grace about it, and she said she knows where to go in times of need.
Vince, I got to ask you, you're a very astute observer of politics. I really listen when you talk about what's going to happen in the future. What do you think is going to happen in November? Are they going to be able to install this Marxist puppet, or do you think Trump's going to prevail?
Don't know anymore because we're living in the twilight zone. Everything is possible. I mean, Martians could land. I really don't know. I think they're going to try and steal the election, of course, but I don't know if they'll be successful in doing so because I think there's an outrage against all that is happening. And I don't think that these immigrants are as pro-communist as these people think that they are. So a lot of them that I speak to are very pro-Trump. I mean, regular laborers, regular minority people, everyone I speak to is pro-Trump. And they're almost like reluctant to say it, but when I open up about it, then they open up about it too.
Interesting.
So,
in other words, Vince, if they fled Venezuela, they don't want to see that happen here. If they fled, say, Nicaragua or Central America, they don't want to see that happen here. They fled Haiti. They don't want to see that happen here. They fled Mexico. They don't want to see that happen here. So, Vince, you think that even the illegals are not going to be so pro-Kamala as the Democrats think, correct?
I don't think so, but I don't know that they have the biggest fraud election system ever, as Biden once said a few years ago. We have the biggest fraud election system going. And that was all set up, of course. That was Obama's primary job, was to come in and secure a communist rule forever, not to bail America out of the 2008 mess, which I think that, as Trump said, if he's not elected, we could be headed towards 2029 type of depression again. one of the things I'm seeing here with these $25,000 handouts, which are ridiculous, the average price of a house is about $450,000 in the country. So the minimum down payment is 5%, which is like $22,000. What about closing costs, which are another 4 or 5%? Where are people going to get that? Not to mention, when you put only 5% down, there's a thing called mortgage insurance premiums, which are going to add to your monthly cost. Now they're going to start saying that's discriminatory. We're discriminating against people who can't afford that. So are they going to change the regulations on that and have a two-tier system too? The average price of a house for $450,000 will cost you $30,000 a year. And people have car payments, credit card payments, not to mention how you qualify for a loan. You have to have a good credit history. You have to have good credit income ratios. I assume many of these people who want these handouts are the same people who didn't pay their student loans. So right away, the credit is screwed up to begin with. So are we now going to have a two-tier system in the banking system, those who qualify by their normal means and those who slide through no matter what their credit is?
And Vince, the way you're brilliantly laying it all out, isn't that exactly similar what happened to 2008, 2009? The housing market just crashed because we were giving out loans to people who had no business getting them, and that inflated the market, created a bubble, and then it eventually popped. That's what we're kind of doing now, correct?
Worse, because the government's going to take control of the banking system after it collapses. So it's insane what's going on. I mean, I really don't know what to make of anything anymore because I can't predict if the sun's going to rise tomorrow.
Vince, you're dead on. Thank you very much for that call. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let me ask you. It is the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's Quality Roofing, Siding, and Windows. Joe Biden is going to be speaking tonight at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Kamala Harris is going to be speaking on Thursday night. Normally, Biden, as the president, would be speaking, later in the week, if not on Thursday night. The fact that they're having him speak tonight so early, is this a sign of disrespecting Biden? Are they disrespecting Biden by having him speak really on the opening night, which is the least watched and the night that people least care about? A, yes. B, no. To me, I think the answer is obvious. I mean, why don't you just slap him in the face, frankly? Just walk up and go, boom. Just slap him in the face. But anyway, that's me. I want to hear from you. A, yes, B, no. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner. And Grace asked me Saturday, why do you always spell your last name? It's annoying. I said, sweetheart, if you knew how many times people still mispronounce or misspell my name, do you know that many people still spell my name Cooner? I can't tell you how many emails I get. Mr. Kuhner, Jeff Kuhner. I'm like, could you at least be in the ballpark? You know what I mean? Like, there's no C in my last name at all. So this is why I spell it out. Kuh, N as in national, ER. Or if you prefer, you can vote via X, my handle there, at the Kuhner Report, all one word, Kuhn as in national, ER. Lines are loaded. Dave in Vermont. Thanks for holding, Dave, and welcome.
Yes. Hey, I got two little topics, and they both kind of deal with China.
Dave, before you get into China, if you don't mind me asking, because when I think Vermont, I think lush farmland, good agriculture. You can grow a lot of food, pretty much anything up in Vermont. Do you have a nice big garden where you live, Dave?
I had a big garden, but it became a little too difficult for my age and my conditions and my arthritis and everything. So now I got just small raised beds. And with the weather we've been having, we've lost almost all crops up here, and they've rotted in the fields and everything. Like we've lost big farmlands that are all totally underwater and covered with silt, under 4 or 5 feet of silt.
We
Dave, I'm
lost
sorry to hear
villages,
that.
roads washed out, everything. It's
Dave,
bad conditions all
if
over.
things get really bad, say Kamala and Waltz, they win in November, they install them in power, and they go ahead with their commie revolution, could you maybe take us in as refugees? Could you take us in, Dave, and maybe teach Ashton how to garden? And maybe I can eke out a living?
You probably have to live in the garage.
That's okay. I mean, hey, as long as I don't have to be outside. You know what I'm saying, Dave? Anything is better than a gulag, Dave. You know what I mean? So I was just thinking, since you're a gardener and stuff, maybe you could teach my Ashton, and I'm going to need my son now to survive, Dave. All right, Dave, can you please hang on? We're going to come back to Dave in Vermont. He's going to talk about China and land, and that's where all this is heading. China. 9:49 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868. Before we go right back to Dave in Vermont, Sandy and I were just chatting off air, and I don't know who originally made the point, but it's actually very true. This is, if all of you want to be like Sandy has lost 81 pounds on Awaken Weight Loss. 81 pounds. Okay, I mean, she looks like $1 million now. I mean, I said, Sandy, please don't lose any more weight because you're going to disappear on us. She has lost over 80 pounds. Well, hey, everybody now can be like Sandy. Just wait for the Kamala Waltz weight loss plan. Don't worry. By the time they're done with these price controls and the food shortages and the eventual starvation, you want to lose 50, 60, 80, hell, 100 pounds, no problemo. And the beauty of it is, it's free. You don't have to join a diet plan. It's free. So if you're looking to lose those excess pounds, Kamala's the ticket, baby. The Kamala weight loss plan will starve you out. Will starve you out of 100 pounds. Guaranteed, or your money back. So, hey, our obesity problem will be solved. Huh? So who says Democrats don't solve problems? Dave in Vermont, you're worried about China and land. I don't blame you. Please, Dave, pick up where you left off.
When you were talking about growing a garden and everything, what we got to kind of remember is the seeds that we buy now are basically every seed company has been bought by globalist corporations. And the way that they engineered the seeds and these hybrid vegetables and everything, you cannot save seed from one year to the next. They're called terminator seeds. You get one growth out of it, and that's it. The next time you got to buy all new seed again. And companies like Monsanto, it was about, 15 years ago, maybe under the Bush administration, the Department of Agriculture turned over emergency food to Monsanto. They would be in control of all of the food grown in this country to feed people. So that's one thing. And another thing is, if we're going to plan on animals to feed us, well, it was 95 years ago from the last depression, and with a far lot less mouths to feed than we have now. If we had to depend upon wildlife and gardens, they would be wiped out in a matter of months, and your rivers would be fished out. There wouldn't be any food. The animals would be getting so hungry they'd be wanting to eat us. Now, along with the land that China's looking at getting and everything, how reciprocal do you think they would be if we started low-level balloon flights over China, looking at which property next to their bases and manufacturing that we can put up surveillance towers and buy property all around it? I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, it's illegal.
Why are we allowing it?
No, you're dead on. No, Dave, you're on fire, by the way. You're dead on. If we launched a low-level surveillance balloon, okay, first of all, they'd shoot it down right away. Number one. Number two, if we were buying up strategic farmland, even strategic real estate, forget farmland, just strategic real estate in China, they'd never allow it. We're the only idiots that allow this. So, Dave, you're completely right. And just to add to what you were saying, what else has Kamala been pushing for? Hard. Banning the consumption and eating of red meat. I mean, it's getting pretty obvious. They want mass starvation. And this is not a conspiracy theory. Look it up. From the World Economic Forum to Klaus Schwab to John Kerry to Obama to Biden to the Clintons to Soros to Bill Gates, all of them say the world is overpopulated. We need depopulation. Here, Kerry's own daughter just literally came out and said, John Kerry's own daughter said, in our new world order, billions of people have to disappear. Well, outside of a nuclear war, what's the best way to make people, quote unquote, disappear? Starve them. Now, they won't starve, but Dave, you and me and the rest of us, we're the ones who are going to starve. Remember, under communism, here, Hugo Chavez put on weight in Venezuela. He became bloated like a pig. Fidel Castro bloated like a pig. Remember all those Soviet leaders bloated like pigs? So the leadership, they ate and gorged at the trough. They never went hungry. It was the peasants who went hungry. Dave, thank you for that call. Rose in Woburn. Thanks for holding, Rose, and welcome.
Thank you very much for hearing me. I wanted to tell you I am a depression baby, and I was talking about food and what you're talking about, the limitation and not having enough. Number one, I want you to call your garden the Victory Garden, because that's what we did in World War II. We dug up our backyard. We grew tomatoes, carrots, lettuce. My mother made jelly out of the grapevine, and that's what you had to do. The question and also the thing that you haven't talked about is you have to pay the money to get the goods. What they did in those days is they issued stamps. That means everybody was given so much per family, and it was paper. And you would go up and pay for your groceries with the paper, and if it was not enough of the money that was designated on the paper, they would give you red plastic coins. And they were only supposed to be used on meat.
Oh, I need more time. I need more time. Rose, please call back again. I want you to finish this, but I know where you're leading. Where you're leading with this. It led to ration cards. Essentially rationing. Kamala Harris wins in November. That's what's going to happen again. Bye-bye.